In 2 hours, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Attorney General Pam Bondi, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Dan Kane will brief top lawmakers on this weekend's Venezuela attack. And while Republicans have largely rallied behind the administration's capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, Politico reports there is bipartisan distrust over whether lawmakers were misled about the administration's end game. Joining us, Virginia Senator and Chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, Mark Warner. Senator, thank you very much, as always, for joining us. How unusual is it, first off, to not be briefed before an action like this when you were in the Gang of Eight?
It's very unusual. It would never have happened in the past. I will acknowledge that Secretary Rubio reached out to me after the strikes had started. We did not connect. It was in the middle of the night where I was. But, you know, he was a member of the Gang of Eight, and Marco and I have been friends for a long time. He would not have stood for this kind of not being briefed when we served together. And the kind of argument the administration's making now that, oh, this was not a military action. I mean, you got 20% of the American fleet off the coast of Venezuela, 15,000 soldiers. We sent in the Delta Force to extract Maduro, and Maduro was a bad guy. Let's acknowledge that on the front end. Our military did a brilliant job. But to somehow say that this was not a military action doesn't pass the smell test. And the irony is they were saying earlier that the attacks on the boats were military, and now this is not. It's just, you know, there's the whole legal argument, but there's also, just very quickly, two things that I'm very concerned about. One, the precedents this is set, that if we can go in and extract a foreign leader just because we believe they violated our laws, what's to stop Putin from taking out Zelensky or taking out the Polish president, or China taking over Taiwan, because Taiwan under Chinese law is a rogue province. And if they're suddenly even going to say, give in the president the benefit of the doubt, our law is better than anyone else's, so we got a higher standard. Well, under that case, why do you take a person like the former Honduran president, President Hernandez, who was convicted in American courts for exactly the same type of charges that are facing Maduro, and then pardon him? So
we have done this in the past, though.
And then finally, the next step. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We've done this with Manuel Noriega. We did this with Saddam Hussein. This leader was under indictment here in the United States. An indictment, by the way, that spanned many years back, and an indictment that lasted under President Biden. Do you see this as changing, and fundamentally changing our reputation and what we are known to do around the world?
Well, let's take both of those cases. In the case of Noriega, Noriega stated that he was in a state of war with the United States. The Panamanian Assembly, their legislature, said they were in a state of war, which they had initiated. There was no state of war from the Maduro government being claimed against America. In the case of Saddam Hussein, you did have, even though there was obviously some manipulation of intelligence, you had a UN security order, and you had actions of a number of countries taking action. This is very different. And again, let me say, Maduro was a bad guy, and when the Venezuelan people voted overwhelmingly to throw him out in 24, we should have taken more action then with the region, frankly. But the idea now that based upon our laws, we can pick and choose who to extract without any even consultation with Congress, one, is against our laws and norms, and two, I don't know how we have any standing at all then to say to Putin, don't take Zelensky, or don't take any other small state around you, or for China to say to any nation in East Asia, we're going to extract your leader if we don't like their policies and they violate our law. This completely unravels as the international order, which, by the way, has screwed up plenty of times, but at least it's been a little bit of a constraining factor on countries. I don't know where we go from here, beyond the question of how we're going to run Venezuela offshore with Armada. Are boots going to be on the ground? Are they not going to be on the ground? It really is confounding.
So this is the next question I have. Arguably, we're about to be in a big mess. But I can't predict the future, but say the regime stays in place and they don't give access to the oil reserves that the president wants, and so the president feels like he needs to go in again, maybe, or say the regime can't keep control of the population or there's infighting, we could see any number of variations of what could happen next in the future. But if it does become a mess of our making, and a mess that we now have to deal with, what would be the best plan of action?
Well, the best plan of action would be not to further go into this mess without making the case to the American people. If the president can convince the American people that it is in our interest to potentially put, soldiers in harm's way again. And remember, the vast majority of these soldiers and sailors are home ported from ships that come from my state in Norfolk, Virginia. He's not made that case. And again, let's look at the oil for a moment. Maduro was a horrible manager. Venezuela used to export 4 million barrels of oil a day. It's down to about 1 million barrels. It will take 2 to 3 years minimum, what people have said, to get the Venezuelan oil infrastructure back to any kind of minimum operational capacity. Are we stuck for 2 or 3 years because we're going to, get the promise of getting all our money returned? Wasn't that the same promise that the Iraqi oil was supposed to pay for our cost of Iraq? That didn't come to pass. So I just feel like there are so many questions, and we're hurling into this, which could in certain ways be even more fundamentally threatening to kind of our overall stability than the Iraq war, because of the precedents it sets, and would then give a green light to our adversaries like China and Russia, and as well as taking all of the Western Hemisphere, which for 70 years under Democrats, Republicans alike, we've said, hey, no, we don't intend to be an imperial power anymore. We're going to try to deal with you as independent countries that we're going to treat with some level of respect. That seems to have gone out the window on Saturday as well. And while Maduro was not an elected leader, the president is now threatening Mexico and Colombia. They both have presidents, whether we agree with them or not, they are democratically elected. Boy, oh boy, this is, you said you can't predict the future. On this one, I think we can predict the future, and it's not bright. Now, I want to hear from the administration and give them their time, and that'll happen, as you mentioned, in a couple hours from now. But I don't see.
What do you need to hear?
Well, I'd like to hear, is there a plan? I'd like them to hear how they can explain away the precedent that this wouldn't give Vladimir Putin a green light to go after Zelensky personally under the same kind of rubric that we've put forward now. And also, I think more importantly for the men and women of our military, who again did an incredible job, before they get put in harm's way again in Venezuela. What is the plan? It's obviously not about drugs the way it was portrayed going into this. It appears to be entirely about oil, and our history of going into countries for oil. I mean, we all remember Iraq, but not to go way back in history, but in 1953, the CIA overthrew the elected government in Iran to try to protect Western interests in terms of Iranian oil. That did not play out too well for Western interests over the last 50 plus years.
Good point. Senator Mark Warner, thanks very much.